looking forward to this too.
Is this microphone working? Can you hear me? Yeah. Hello? Be afraid, be very afraid. So I had the privilege to join you last year, at least the top half of me did via video. It's my honor to be here in person to do this. I feel like I'm kind of the halftime entertainment. This is going to be an interactive session. So let's see what we're going to talk about. So I just want to make a comment on some of the things we've heard so far and what I expect that we're going to hear about for the rest of the day as well. And that's, as Sarah was talking about the declining margin problems in agency land, I was thinking, wow, this could have been a conference that I attended 15 years ago where we were talking about declining agency margins. And there's the pricing issue, there's, it strikes me that so many of the challenges that we have when it comes to new business development, whether it's selling, negotiating, pricing, dealing with procurement, it really stems from our inability to say no, doesn't it? Right? We should just rebrand this conference. We should just call it No. My favorite book on negotiating is a book titled Start with No. It might not be the best negotiating book out there, but it's the best idea. You start with no, and then interesting things seem to happen. And there's all kinds of reasons we don't start with no. I think one of them is we feel like no is so final, and it's not. Every no that you deliver in your conversations with your client, be it procurement, marketing, et cetera, every no that you deliver, you reserve the right to remove. So sometimes it makes sense to start negotiations with the word no or some variation of no, and then see what happens from there. And if you have to retreat from there, it makes sense to retreat. So last year I spoke about really two different approaches to new business, the standard approach, pitch-based approach, and my alternative win without pitching based approach. And I have 25 minutes to come back and go a little bit deeper into the win without pitching approach. I thought the best way to do this would be to do an interactive session. First, let's define the terms. What is a pitch? I think we all know what a pitch is, right? This is from my book. The definition comes from the book. To attempt to sell or win approval for one's ideas by giving them away for free, usually within a competitive buyer-driven selection process. So you were lined up against your peers in an apples-to-apples comparison, and you are told, or it's implied that it's in your best interest to give your best thinking away for free. You're invited to solve the problem as proof of your ability to solve the problem, right? So that's the pitch, and that's the problem we're trying to get away from. In fact, I don't see the pitch as the problem. The pitch is really the symptom of a larger set of problems. But what I want to do today is, I mentioned last year, two different approaches. There's an approach that kind of I advocate. It's the name of my business, it's the name of my book, etc. But I also understand that it's not one size fits all. In fact, the reason I want to give you the mindset test, or what we sometimes call the Jedi test, are you a new business Jedi? And I recognize there's only a few people who are directly in the new business function. I want you to see if this approach makes sense for you. Because there's really two different perspectives on the pitch, right? There's first we're going to do a little survey. We're going to do a little baseline survey. Okay, so there are 5 questions that come after this, but this is just a baseline survey. And the question is, how frequently do your new business wins happen outside of a pitch? A, never. B, rarely. C, sometimes. D, often. E, always. So everybody got their answer? Everybody's got their answer, right? Okay, now this is where you get to decide one of the rules of this interactive session. Are we going to share our answers? Shall we? It's so much more fun when you're sharing your answers. Okay, so we're all in agreement, right? We're going to share our answers? Okay, how many of you said A, never? Really? You're entirely converted. Okay, B, we rarely win outside of the pitch? Some rarely, okay. C, sometimes. There's an example of extremeness aversion, right? What about D, often? Oh, yeah. Okay. Hands high, the E's. Any E's? 1, 2, Tim. Consultants don't count. They're not real people. And I don't know who answered at the back. Are you a consultant? Sort of?
I am, yeah, new business consultant.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So the answer is we have no E's, okay? But a lot of C's and a surprising number of D's. That's interesting. Okay, good start. This is a quote from a guy who runs a fairly successful mid-sized, well, by all appearances successful, kind of mid-sized firm, multiple locations based in the U.S. I've redacted, it was up there briefly, but I've redacted his name and the name of the firm because this quote came. Do you ever get an email from somebody where you've emailed somebody and then they take your audacious email and they forward it to somebody else with some commentary, but instead of forwarding, they hit reply? Does that ever happen to you? Okay, this happened to me. So the CEO of this firm emailed back and said, talk about an oxymoron. I've never won without pitching. We and every other agency under the sun need to fill out an RFP, hope that we're invited into the finals, make at least one in-person presentation, and then almost always wait for weeks or months to be told the decision. And then he further said, you would be foolish to believe the win without pitching brand promise. Now, I don't put this quote up here to make fun of him. I put the quote up here because that's his belief, and it's shared by, I think, the majority of people in the advertising profession on the agency side of the business. And he's not wrong. He runs a successful firm. That's just the way he sees things. There are alternate views. This is a firm that I know quite well based in Sydney, Australia. This approach truly does work. My firm is a living example. Blah, blah, blah. Tripled size, healthy profit margin. I know the details of the firm. I have more confidence because we no longer allow prospective clients to call the shots and waste our time on free pitching and RFPs. So he's right too. He used to pitch his brains out, the firm did. Now they no longer pitch, more successful as a result. So two different points of view on whether or not the pitch really is something that we must live with, or it's something that can be dealt with. Now, I've worked with enough people over the last 16 years to know that some people there's something about their mindset that they just cannot get their head around my alternative approach, and therefore I don't think that approach is right for them. But I want to find out how many of you in this room have that win without pitching Jedi mindset. So let's get to the survey questions. So do you have a win without pitching mindset? You'll hear me refer to it as the Jedi mindset. I'm going to ask you 5 questions. I would like you to record your answers just in a letter, A, B, C, D. I'll ask you each of the 5 questions, one after the other. I'd like you to just note in order what letter you chose. And then I'll go over the answers and talk about what the response says about you and your firm and your mindset. All right? Yeah. Question number 1. So the first question is a little bit different. There's no judgment associated with any of these questions, but this one in particular. It's really a question of your personal motivational makeup. And I have an objective assessment that I use on my clients to see. This is basically a blunt force instrument to get to the answer for which I use a more objective assessment typically. The question is, there are 2 piles on the table in front of you. You can only have one pile. Which pile do you want? The first pile is money. And all the finance directors said, yeah, I don't even need to see the second one. And the second pile is respect. So be honest, there's no judgment, there's no right or wrong. This is really, if you can answer this one honestly, you'll just learn a little bit about how this affects, and I think you can start to see, but you'll learn about how this would affect your natural approach to business development. Okay, that's question 1. Just write down A or B. Question 2, your dream client, that client you've always wanted to work with, holds a group briefing for all firms under consideration. They insist that any questions be posed in this forum, in this group briefing, so that no one firm has an information advantage. Got it? That's the scenario. The question is, what do you see as the proper, most effective approach? And there are 3 options here. Do you A, attend the group briefing and endeavor to differentiate your firm by asking the smartest questions? Do you B, decline to attend the group briefing and seek another way to get your questions answered, even if this means that you might be ejected from the process? Or do you C, decline to participate in the process, walking away entirely? A, B, or C. Just write down A, B, or C for question 2. And if it's the second letter that you write down, you can probably just infer it's question 2, right? That was funny. Question 3. You receive an RFP from your dream client. Getting to the shortlist requires a lengthy written response in a tight time frame, and you're busy. The RFP begs some questions, but the email explicitly says that phone calls will not be accepted prior to submission. So it's don't call us, complete the submission, send it in. What do you see as the proper, most effective approach? Is it A, politely decline to participate in such a draconian process? B, ignore, I shouldn't editorialize. B, ignore the statement and phone the client to get your questions answered. So you're told no phone calls, do you phone anyway? C, do you submit the response as requested and then attempt to set up a call before the next round? Or do you D, get your questions answered via email? There's 4 choices, just write down A, B, C, or D. Question 4. A prospect sends you an RFP for an engagement designed to address their declining revenue. It aligns perfectly with your experience, so you think you have a pretty good shot at winning this. You have concerns, however, that the root of their revenue problems lie elsewhere. So they're saying we need to hire an agency to help us stem declining revenue. It's happening for this reason. You think the reason is elsewhere. Do you A, what do you see as the most proper, most effective approach? Do you A, give the client the benefit of the doubt and respond to the RFP as issued? Do you B, submit your proposal, raising within it your concern that other areas may need to be explored? Do you C, call the client and attempt to get them to put the RFP aside and explore the issue with you directly? Do you D, submit a proposal for a diagnostic, a paid engagement in which you will explore the issue with the client? A, B, C, or D? Everybody has their answer? Last question. A client recommends your firm to her friend who calls you to set up a meeting. In the call, it becomes obvious that this prospect is too small for your firm. What do you see as the proper, most effective approach? Is it A, take the meeting and the account for the sake of the client relationship, the referring client? Is it B, take the meeting and look for a polite way of deflecting the prospect to another firm? Is it C, tell the prospect they're too small for your firm but offer a short meeting of free advice? Or is it D, tell the prospect they're too small for your firm but offer... Is it D, tell the prospect they're too small for your firm and refer them to a more appropriate firm? A, B, C, or D. So you should have 5 letters on your piece of paper or on your phone. Let's see what your answers say about you. How did you do? See if there are any Jedis in the room. Okay, question 1, there are 2 piles on the table in front of you. You can only have one. Which one do you want? The first one was money. The second is respect. Oh yeah, I've given you the answer. How many of you said money? Again, there's no moral issue. This is an issue of motivational makeup. Okay, so hands high. So the great thing, if you answered money, that means that you have a high competitive drive. And typically in business development roles, we typically want, or most sales roles, we want people with high competitive drives. They're able to barge through obstacles. They're fairly resilient. They can handle rejection, etc. If you said B, respect, people who value respect over money tend to be a little bit more patient. Right? And one of the challenges over the years in agency, not just agency business development, but in B2B sales, is because we've asked salespeople in a complex consultative sale, a more patient salesperson is better. So a person with less competitive drive is more likely to navigate to a successful conclusion at higher margin. But they're not as good at lead generation. So once we decouple lead generation from navigating the sale, then it makes sense to have people who are navigating the sale, handling the negotiations, to have people who do not have such a high innate drive to win. So if that's you, if you value respect over winning, and money is a surrogate for winning, then you are more likely to do the things that I'm going to suggest to you over the next few minutes that you should be doing in the sale, that are kind of implied in the Jedi answers. So you're not wrong if you chose money. This is just, again, it's a function of your personal motivational makeup. But if you're one of those people who chose respect over money, you're going to find the win without pitching approach is a little bit more natural to you. Now, how many of you kind of thought this answer wasn't up there, but you thought, you know, I think if I take the respect pile, I might be able to get the money too? Yeah, because that in a nutshell, in the fewest words possible, that's the win without pitching approach to new business. Pursue the respect, and hopefully the money will follow. Right. Okay, question 2. Maybe I'll just stand where the light is good. This isn't question 2. This is the point I'm supposed to make, clearly. The point is that you should spend more time rehearsing. That's my point. I believe agency new business development is nothing but a game. And the game goes by the name, the polite battle for control. It's important that the client allows you to control, power, leadership. You can use these words interchangeably. It's important that the client allows you to lead before you're hired, because if you're not allowed to lead in the sale, if you're not allowed some control in the sale, you're not going to get any after you're hired. And if you're the business development person or on the business development team, it's not just your job to bring the business in. It's to bring the business in at high margin, low cost of sale, with the firm best position to be able to do your best work, right? So it's imperative that you establish whether or not the client will let you lead in the sale before you're hired. Therefore, it's imperative that you push back a little bit. Right? And if you value respect over money, that's going to come more natural to you. Does that make sense? Okay, question 2. All questions posed in the group briefing. So there's a client, your dream client says you've been invited to pitch. There's a group briefing for all firms under consideration. If you have any questions, you're going to have to save them. Have you been in this situation? Don't ask us any questions. Show up and ask your questions so that your competitors, you don't have an advantage over your competitors, right? That's not a good sign when the rules are laid out that way. So the 3 options: A, attend and endeavor to differentiate your firm by asking smart questions. B, decline to attend and seek another way, even though you might get ejected. And C, decline to participate in the process, walking away entirely. How many A's? Yeah, a good number of A's. Let's say 25, 33, about a third. How many B's? About the same number. So C's, very small number of C's. Okay, what's the right answer? What's the win without pitching Jedi answer? No, that's a trick answer. It's B. Decline to attend and seek another way to get your questions answered. This is an example of the beginning of the pushing and jostling that constitutes the polite battle for control. Right? Like Tim said, you say, well, we're not going to complete that scorecard. We're not going to submit the way you've asked us to submit. We don't attend group briefings where we're on it. Like if we have intelligent questions, we want to demonstrate how appropriate we are for this engagement by asking the most intelligent questions. We're not going to ask those questions in front of our competitors. You'll get the theme here that one of my basic tenets in sales, in agency business development, is to say what you're thinking. Right? We're so conditioned to be overly polite to the client because they have the money. Just say what you're thinking. Say it early, say it politely. Why would we do that? Our competitors are in the room. We're not going to... And then push back and look for another way. I'm only aware of one study that's done on this, but how many... And it was a study done in the UK on the procurement of legal services. So in tendering for legal services across multiple competitions, where the participants were told, if you do X, you will be ejected from the process. And often X is reach out, talk, phone calls, etc. How often do you think a firm gets ejected from the process? Small sample size, but the answer in that one study was 0. 0. You can always apologize, right? That's the Jedi answer. Attend and endeavor to differentiate your firm. That's the compliant solution. And I'm advocating the uncompliant solution, right? And C, that's the overly literal interpretation of win without pitching. Or that's for people who have really high power needs relative to their competitive drive, and that's me. My power needs are in the 90th percentile. My competitive drive is in the 10th percentile. Therefore, I'm very patient. I value respect way more than money. My wife used to say to me, you'd rather be right than rich. I proved her wrong. I'm both. Because I went for the respect and I got the money too. So the right answer is to just start pushing back. Start pushing back right away. Start pushing back on a flawed selection process, a flawed procurement process right away. It's very hard to be compliant early. Once you establish that you're a compliant person/firm, and then you start to push back, whoa, that's cognitive dissonance is going to kick in. It's going to seem very offensive to the client. So if you're going to be, I don't want to say an asshole, but if you're going to be difficult in the sale, and I advocate you being a little bit difficult in the sale, you need to begin at the beginning. Be difficult right away. You really throw clients off when you start out being very nice and compliant, and then you become difficult later. Okay. To what extent, oh yeah, this is not a question, is it? I shared this slide last year. I want to talk about the importance of affecting the buying process. I'm going to have to speak quicker. This is a study I did a couple of years ago. These are firms who did not affect the buying process. You look at the red firms lost, the beige firms won. These are firms that moderately affected the buying process, more likely to win than lose. These are firms that significantly affected the buying process. If you moderately affect the buying process, if you push back, if you get concessions granted to you, your odds of winning are now greater than they are of losing. If you significantly affect the buying process, if you push back and you get significant concessions granted to you, your odds of winning go way up. I'm going to have to move real quick here. No phone calls before the RFP response. How many of you had A? Oh. Sorry, how many of you had A? You all had B now, didn't you? Okay, we won't even do that. Ignore the statement and phone the client to get your questions answered. Very similar question to the other one. I once had a phone conversation with a client I'd worked with 5 years earlier. Forget what we were talking about. She said, Blair, you'd be very proud of me. I just got an RFP from a Fortune 500 company, and we said no. I said, great, good for you. What happened after that? She said, nothing. We walked away. It was 5 years earlier that I'd worked with him. I thought, my God, what have I done? 5 years of them being proud of not pitching but not winning. The goal is to win. The goal is to win. Okay? The 4 priorities of winning new business. First, win without pitching if you can. Second, if you cannot win without pitching, derail the pitch. Third, if you cannot derail the pitch, gain the advantage. If you can gain the advantage by getting concessions granted to you, like the previous slide showed, then it makes sense for you to pitch. It makes sense for you to continue, right? Because in every competitive situation, somebody has the advantage. If it's you, go ahead. If it's not you, the 4th priority says that's when you walk away. Question 4, RFP for the wrong solution. How many of you said A? Question 4? Nobody's sharing their answers anymore? What happened? Nobody said A. How many said B? Oh. You all said C and D. So the right answer is C. Call the client. Attempt to get them to put the RFP aside and explore the issue with you. And an acceptable compromise is to just submit a proposal for something else, for a paid diagnostic, where you're saying, you know, we think the problem lies elsewhere. We have this prepackaged program. It's called X. It takes this long. It costs this much money. hire us to do this, and we'll get to the root of the problem. We'll validate your self-diagnosis, essentially, right? That's a valid alternative approach. But really, you should be calling the client. You should be challenging their view of what their situation, what their problem is, and what their solution is. And I talked about this last year. There's a great book called The Challenger Sale. It talks all about it. Challenger salespeople are far more likely to be top performers. Last one is referred client is too small. I really like this question. This actually comes up a lot. The right thing to do here is to say what you're thinking. The wrong thing is to take the client because you're very good client referred. You are not in the business of taking charity clients, right? The right thing is to say to that prospect, listen, you're too small for us, but I'm going to help you. So I can refer you to another firm right now. You can come on in, we can meet, and then I can refer you. Or if it's a very good client and you're worried about alienating that client, the referring client, and this is a small, very small client, you can just help the client for free. And then you go back to your referring client because you have a problem with your referring client. Your referring client doesn't fully understand those organizations that you can best help, that you can best work with. Does that make sense? The wrong thing to do is to be overly polite and be saddled with the wrong client because it was referred. Most of the time, the referring client, they don't want to saddle you with somebody who it doesn't make sense for you to work with, right? So we didn't get everybody's answer to that, sorry. How did you score? If you had 5 Jedi answers, then congratulations, you have a win without pitching Jedi mindset. I have lightsabers for you later. 3 to 4, you're a win without pitching Padawan. You all know what that is. All but the Trekkies know what that is. 1 to 2, you're a win without pitching curious. And 0, you have a pitch-based mindset, and I'm not attaching any judgment to that. Well, maybe a little bit of judgment. All right, I've gone a little long. I apologize for that. Oh, I wanted to leave you with one quote here. The earlier quotes I showed you, the first was from a PR firm, the one that said we'd never win without pitching, and the second one was from a design firm. And I thought I should include one from an ad agency. This is a guy who ran a large healthcare agency for years, and then a couple of years ago he founded this one. And the beginning of the quote is, he said, we've all won without pitching where we had a previous relationship and we went in and closed without pitching. He said, yeah, we should all win those opportunities all day long. But he said, talk to me about the cold RFP and pitch process you derailed, gained an unfair advantage, and ultimately won because you changed the rules of the game. Now you have my attention. Then he says, does my agency pitch? Maybe. Yeah, his firm pitches. Do we ever play by the pitch rules and procurement process? Hell no. And the bottom line difference to this firm and his previous firm has been significant, has been in the millions of dollars. My book is The Win Without Pitching Manifesto. My podcast is called Two Bobs. It's on creative entrepreneurship. And my forthcoming book, August 21st, is Pricing Creativity. You can find more information at winwithoutpitching.com. I'm Blair Enns on social media. Thank you for playing along.